Brilliance Audio presents Frozen Rage by Steve McHugh, performed by Simon Mattox. Chapter 1. The Realm of Dreich. I was pretty sure I'd made a terrible decision to come here. "No! Fuck you!" the large man bellowed, getting to his feet at one end of the table laden with food and drink. He pointed a long finger at the man sat at the opposite end, 30 feet away. If I was honest, it could have been 3 times that, and it still wouldn't have been long enough. Tommy Carpenter, my best friend, stood beside me and sighed as he stroked his long, dark beard, a sure sign he was beginning to lose his patience. "I really wish I'd stayed at home," he muttered under his breath. 30 people sat around a table designed for twice that number, although the shouting match between the 2 men at the opposing ends had everyone else moved back from where they'd been seated. The hall we were in was designed to look like something from a European palace, with high ceilings where murals of various gods, some of whom I couldn't have named if I'd tried, looked like they'd stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. The walls were adorned with paintings, several of which I was almost sure were from masters of the craft back on the Earth realm. At least one was an original Michelangelo, and I wondered from where they'd been stolen. The stained glass windows that ran along one wall let in rainbows of colour that bounced off the highly polished wooden floor. "It's fucking Shakespearean," Remy said from the other side of me. "Maybe they'll murder one another, and we could all stop pretending we care." As far as ideas went, it wasn't the worst I'd heard recently. "Well, it is a wedding," Diana said from the other side of Remy. "It's probably not a proper wedding until at least one person has been bludgeoned with something." "You go to some weird-ass weddings," Remy said, looking up at her. Remy was a 3.5-foot tall fox man. He'd pissed off the wrong witch coven, and they tried to kill him by turning him into a fox. Clearly, it hadn't worked, but the witches had all died, and their lives had been poured into a newly fox-man-shaped Remy. He dealt with it by swearing and threatening to stab people. To be honest, as far as coping mechanisms went, I'd heard worse. The 2 men were now face to face, spewing insults about each other's mothers, fathers, and at one point a particularly inventive curse about a goat and a block of cheese. "When do we step in?" Diana asked. Tommy sighed. Like half the people sat at the table, he was a werewolf, although he was probably stronger than any of them, and certainly less likely to pick a fight at a wedding brunch with the father of the bride. We lions made up the other half of the guests. There was a long and unpleasant history between the 2 species, mostly involving vast numbers of murders. Peace had been brokered for a few centuries, but that hadn't stopped either side trying to tear the other in half whenever the chance arose. Some don't forgive or forget, and some are just assholes. The father of the bride and uncle of the groom most certainly fell into those categories. An apple was thrown, and it smashed against the wall beside Diana's head. Diana hadn't even flinched. She just slowly turned to look at the remains of the destroyed fruit, and then back at the no longer arguing families. All eyes rested on her. Diana was half weir-bear, and not someone you wanted to anger, unless you liked the idea of having your arms ripped off so she could beat you to death with them. My mind cycled through options of what was going to happen next, when I spotted the expression of glee on Remy's face. The doors to the dining hall were thrown open. "Enough!" a large man bellowed as he stormed inside. He had a dark, bushy beard, was broad-shouldered with bulging muscles on his arms and a barrel chest. Long, dark hair flowed over his shoulders. He couldn't have looked less like the romanticized version of a Viking if he'd been pulled into the room while standing on a longboat. "I'm going outside," I said. "Come get me if they start to throw anything more dangerous than fruit." Tommy clapped me on the shoulder, and I left through a side exit usually reserved for the staff. The castle was on theme with the dining hall, designed to resemble something from the Middle Ages, if not earlier, but it was a much more modern piece of architecture. Even so, there were several secret passages for staff to use, and on more than one occasion as I walked the long hallway, adorned with old watercolour paintings of wars, and a carpet that I was pretty sure was thick enough to lose yourself in if you stood still for too long, one of the larger paintings was pushed open, and several members of staff emerged. Most wore an expression of "oh crap" on their face, as they presumably tried to remember if I was one of the arseholes fighting in the dining hall.